most underrated voice in all media. The Alternative's alternative. Chuck Ochelli.
So it is the 20th day of January 2016, according to that thing we call a calendar, and it is just after 8 p.m. on the East Coast where I happen to be sitting at the moment. Of course, that would be 5 p.m. on the Pacific left coast, whatever it is you want to call it, and we are live on American Freedom Radio at AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the Ochelli Effect. Now, this is the type of show tonight that will be very much different from what I usually do, but I'm extremely happy to have Jordan Maxwell with me tonight, and the reason is we are going to just have a discussion here which I guarantee you was not scripted, was not choreographed in any way, shape, or form as per usual on my show. I don't know exactly where any of this is going to go, folks. I did have a chance to speak with Jordan in November during the American Freedom Radio Marathon. And by the way, we do appreciate you, whether you've decided to go to the website or you have utilized your fondle slab of choice via your applicable application. Either way, if you're catching us further on down the stream, that's fine too. And who knows what time of day it is or what day it actually is, where you are as you hear this, but still you're appreciated. I did get to speak with him during that AFR marathon, though, briefly, and I've got to tell you, more questions than answers in my mind came from that discussion and also from the examination of Mr. Maxwell's material. So hopefully we will get to some of the things that I had in my mind and some of the things that may be in you, the listeners' minds, tonight. Mr. Maxwell, how are you doing tonight?
Well, very good, Chuck, and thank you for inviting me again. So
well,
we'll see where this goes.
Right, and I'm not making it up for the listeners' clarification, right? There is no preparation that has gone into this.
Not at all.
We are having a completely unscripted discussion. And the only thing I did do is just before we went on air, and I reveal everything to the listener because that's just the way I conduct myself, is that I did explain to you something that I wanted to strike upon right out of the gate, without hesitation, and that is this concept, which is extremely prevalent in what some people may call, and here I go holding up the air quotes again for you at home, the alternative media. The continuous, absolute parroting of this blame, every single terrible act, every single ugly thing that appears on the earth is attributed directly to, well, let's be blunt. I mean, it's all about the Jews. It's all about the Jews. It's all about the Jews. I hear this continuously, constantly, without end. They blame the Jewish people for everything. Now, my studies of history, before I ever started doing any of this stuff, before I even spent that time, which was, more than 2 decades working on the JFK assassination, et cetera, before and long before I started doing this radio show, it seemed to me as though if you were to appoint to a religiously based organization and say that they had undue influence, spilled much blood across the planet, caused a great deal of suffering, torture, and political intrigue. I mean, the dirty intelligence game long before there was ever even the dream of something like the CIA began with what we might call today the Catholic Church, Vatican City, Rome. Now, am I completely insane, Jordan, or what?
No, my God, that's the history of the world. Just go back to a library and sit down and read the history of the world, and you will find that Rome has dominated Europe for about, 2,300 years, and Europe has dominated the world for 2,300 years. So I guess all roads lead to Rome. Not the Jews. All roads lead to Rome. Yes, I mean, there are certain Jews that can be blamed, but ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, the ultimate dark secret is that the Jews, I've told you before, 3/4 of all of my friends around the world, and for all my personal friends, 3/4 of all my friends are Jewish. And we sit and commiserate all the time together. You know, they're talking about all the horrible, terrible things the New World Order's doing and all the Nazi and fascist and communist crap going on. And these are just good people. They're all my dear friends, and they're all good people because I've known them for years. And they're complaining and crying about and lamenting about the system we live under, like all the other of my friends. So I don't see the Jews as such. I think it's ludicrous to blame Jews as such for all the troubles of the world. But having said that, there's always going to be a but, and that is, just as we were talking about before going on the air, that, Sicily has a lot of people living there, Sicilians. But there are some Sicilians that are really bad. We call mafia. And so there are some Sicilians that are really bad. Well, there in Ireland, there's a lot of Irish people there that are very good people, but there's a few really bad ones. That goes on throughout the world. There's a few bad ones everywhere in any culture. So there's going to be good and bad in all things, period. But especially when you go back and start looking at the actual history of the world we live in, and go back to the Roman Empire, and before that the Grecian Empire and the Babylonian, and you begin to see that there's always been a presence, a dark, what I would refer to as a demonic depravity system of the powerful wielding over the poor and the innocent and what am I trying to say, as opposed to powerful, as the poor and working class peoples of the world have always been dominated by warlords, murderers, vicious. And that's, of course, understandable because most people want to just live their lives and their families and their friends and leave the rest, and the rest of the world live the way you want. But there are certain people in this world who are mentally deranged. They are psychotic. They are criminals. And that's who they are. That's how they live. They live from day to day by ripping people off, murdering, lying. And so in this dog-eat-dog world, whoever rises to the top is usually the worst dog on the block. And that's why he is in control of all the other dogs. And so when you see what's actually happening, I remember in the movie Godfather 3, in the third Godfather, Michael Corleone is sitting at the very end of the movie. Michael is sitting on the porch with his sister. And he says, in the movie, he says, "Sister, when I was growing up as a little kid, I always believed that the higher you rise in society, the more correct and honest and lawful everything has to be." And he said, "Now I look back on my life and realize it was just the opposite. The higher you rise in this world, the more corrupt and evil you must be." Well, that tells me, because I already knew that, and the reason why that's true, that you must be very, very evil to rise to the top of leadership. Why? Because our whole world is, as the scripture says, and the Bible says, the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. There is no doubt in my mind that that is exactly the case, that the entire earth has been, for as far back in history as we can go, has always been overshadowed, is the word I use. That the human race has been overshadowed by a dark, evil, otherworld influence. Something very dark and very evil actually rules this earth, period. And the concept that there's a God who loves everyone, who loves the children and creates wonderful and beautiful things, I do not buy. I am totally convinced that the earth as we know it has a totally different history than anything you've ever heard. And one of the reasons why is because we are finding, one of the reasons why I believe that we are being led by a higher power that is about as vicious and demonic and depraved as you can possibly imagine, is because if you go into like Africa and all over the world, we're finding what is called out of place artifacts. Things which are found that make no sense to anyone. And since that's the case, scientists don't discuss it. Because the scientists didn't find it and they didn't discover it, well, it must not be important. And especially if it throws a monkey wrench into their belief system completely by finding something that you can hold in your hand that tells you your whole idea of history is totally incorrect. No wonder the scientists don't want to look at out-of-place artifacts. And what I'm talking about is that, like in South Africa, they were digging very, very deep mines, and they go down to a strata. They go down so far into the earth, how many miles, I don't know, miles into the earth, and they hit a strata which all paleontologists and archaeologists will agree that at that depth of in the ground, you're hitting strata which is 3.5 to 4 billion years old. And at that strata, in that strata that's 3.5 to 4 billion years old, that all scientists agree, you're finding handmade artifacts, strange bracelets, rings, strange artifacts. Somebody had created. It didn't just pop in, a ring just doesn't pop out of nowhere. So somebody was here 4.5 billion with a B. 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. And so I don't know what that does for your modern day educational system. You know, that we know everything about mankind. We've got it all nailed down. We know everything there is to know. And all the Marxist, Leninist, Soviet communist professors in their universities today will tell you we know everything there is to know about everything in the whole world. Well, and point of fact, no, the entire world we live in has been under, is now, and I think probably always will be, under a demonic depravity, an evil, filthy, and degenerate presence on the earth that promotes violence, rape, plunder, chaos, the destruction of families, the destruction of governments. It's a very ancient story, and of course we go about all the writings of the ancient world, and there's so many good people out there today that are talking about this that really know what they're doing. Like Michael Cremo, for instance. Michael Cremo is one right off the top of my head, one of the best out there, and Lloyd Pye was another one. If you go on the web and type in Lloyd Pye, P-Y-E, and listen to his discussions, it'll blow your mind about what was on this earth hundreds of millions of years ago. And of course we know in the oceans of the world, off the coast of Cuba, off the coast of Okinawa, off the coast of Florida and the Bermuda Triangle, all over the world in the oceans are great, huge temples. We know that there's seashells and salt deposits on the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Nobody's ever discussed how come seashells and salt deposits are on the pyramid in Egypt. Nobody seems to realize that the Sphinx was water eroded. The erosion of Sphinx is by water. Most people don't know what's really going on this earth and the actual real history. And so that's why I'm saying I am totally convinced that we as humans are being overshadowed by some sort of a profoundly evil but brilliant mindset from somewhere, like the Knights Templars used to say, as above, so below. I think there's something to that, because what's going on here on the earth below implies that there's some sort of an overshadowing of the earth. The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one, as what the Bible says. And I think that's exactly true. I think
I think you're exactly correct, and the fact is that this is nothing new. This is not some sort of modern concoction, by those who have great imaginations. Reality dictates, and I constantly hear these stories, in fact, about archaeological digs, not necessarily describing these billions of years old artifacts, but I have heard many stories of archaeological digs that show evidence of human sacrifice long before, not just relegated to people like the Mayans and and these individuals. They were, what the normal story is, Mr. Maxwell. They're savages, therefore they prayed to strange gods and they thought that this was a good thing. But honestly, all across the planet, you find evidence of human sacrifice, of child sacrifice.
Everywhere.
There is no place that's exempt from it, right? I mean, and that in and of itself tells you that if a race of beings are set upon one another in this way, and that bloodletting is probably the most prevalent characteristic of a species.
That's right.
What does that tell you about what's influencing that species? I mean, this is just my observation, but...
Yeah, but you're right. That's exactly what I'm seeing. Something that has a consistency for thousands and countless thousands of years, the same kind of murder, violence, human sacrifice. I believe, and there's a young lady out there that you really need to know about. Her name is Tracy Twyman, Twymann, Tracy Twyman. I consider her to be extremely important because she's really right on target. She talks about the demonic depravity which is behind our word of government, money, commerce, the demonic depravity behind our religions, governments, the words and terms and the symbols. And hell, I've been talking about that for years. But she has had actual, she's really done her homework on talking about how money is created and how and another person that's really good on this stuff is Joseph Farrell. Farrell, Joseph Farrell. Joseph is incredibly brilliant stuff on the occult, demonic stuff going on behind world government and money and commerce, and how your money is based on sacrifice, and how monies thousands of years ago, the monies of the ancient empires were based upon the value of that currency or those coins or whatever on the basis of human sacrifice. And then bring it into today, which Joseph Farrell does beautifully. I'm just fumbling through it. But that our wars today are all part and parcel of a system of human sacrifice in order to back up our currency. So, like the mafia says, if you haven't killed somebody, you don't have any currency with the mob. You need to kill somebody to have currency, the term is. Well, I'm saying that especially Joseph Farrell and Tracy Twyman are very, very important when it comes to understanding why you have to kill people to make your money valuable. It's some kind of an occult sacrifice that you must sacrifice, blood sacrifice, so that your money will be involved in some sort of a world system of occultism that your money operates in. So.
And this ties to directly to stuff like birth certificates as well.
Absolutely. No
because now I've heard this, and excuse me for kind of going through it in a sloppy way, but
that's the way I do it.
Well, hey, but you're a lot more eloquent than I am about this stuff. I've got to say, the concept though that I've heard about is this. We have these birth certificates. Okay, people talk about it, and okay, you're part of the corporation, and you're part of this and that, and therefore you become an asset, and all these things. But what's really fascinating to me is the idea that these things are used in a symbolic way, which of course any practice which is, let's use the term occult, but it's not really a fair term because occult simply means hidden. But in a dark ritual sort of way. These things are meant to symbolize a person. I mean, much like people have heard the legends of voodoo dolls, right?
That's right.
Which, it symbolizes the person. It's not the person. It may contain some aspect of that person. So the birth certificate becomes the surrogate for the person. And I've actually heard of rituals being conducted with these birth certificates in places like Vatican City. I mean, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, and that's why if a baby's born in a hospital, they always take what do you call it? When you go into a bank, you put the stuff on your finger and put your thumbprint on a check. Well, they do the same thing when a baby's born in a hospital. They'll rub it with the black ink stuff and then put the baby's footprint on paper. And so the idea is that most people have never heard of this, and most people think it's all a bunch of bull and silly. But I know it's because they are symbolically own your soul. The bottom of your feet is called your sole of your foot. And so they are making a map and commemorating that they own your soul. And so, but what is difficult about all of this subject and all the subjects I talk about is that most people have never heard any of this. And so there's a problem with something called cognitive dissonance. Right. Cognitive dissonance, if you look it up in a dictionary, simply means that if you're hearing something for the first time in your life that you've never heard before, and it doesn't match anything you've ever heard in your life and goes against most of what you thought you knew, that you just disregard it because it's obviously on its face stupid. Why is it stupid? Well, because you've never heard it. And we know that's another obvious, that you are obviously one of the most well-informed, well-read human beings ever to have actually walked on the earth. And if you haven't heard it, then obviously it's stupid. It has no basis, in fact, at all, because you've never heard it. Well, then when you begin to look at the human race and you find out, you know what, so much of the human race don't even know they're alive. And the people who do know, like George Carlin says, it's a big club and you ain't in it. But the people who do know in the big club, who are at the top of this world, they know. But they're not telling you anything. And why? Quite simply, you are not. It's on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know. And why is that true? Because the people at the top of this world know. They're not stupid, and they know. 90% of the people and 95% of the people who will hear one of the elites speaking about these kind of subjects, they're going to call him an imbecile, a nut, a goofball, and rant and rave because you can talk on the web and call anybody anything you want. And so the brilliant people, the very powerful people in this world, they're not stupid. They just figure, look at, why tell the goy? Why tell the working class poor of the world, because they don't have brains enough to fall off the chair? They're going to badmouth you and turn your information on you and mock you in public. So why don't you just form a secret society, and only those who have shown themselves to be highly educated, well-read, well understood history, the world around them, and very mature, they come into your secret society. They come into your private club. And the rest of the people out there working from day to day, 9 to 5, they don't even know they're alive. They have no idea how the world works. They don't know what commerce is. They don't know what a court is. They don't know how a government works. As a matter of fact, they don't even know anything. All they know is they've been told to drink your beer and watch your ball game and go to church, and that's it. Just shut up and stay out of the way. So right. I understand, the idea that there's a big club and we're not in it. But I understand why. It's because you cannot tell the normal person, I'm being brutally honest with you. You cannot tell the public the real truth. You can't do it. And very important elitist people, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds of the world, know that. You don't have to explain it to them. They already know. You cannot tell the working class poor of the world the real truth. Why? Because first of all, they will ridicule you to the grave. They will mock you and laugh at you, ridicule you and call you names and sue you and drag your name through the mud and you'll become the laughing stock of. So that's why the elite don't tell us anything. So you're not going to drag anybody's name through the mud for telling you something, because they're not going to tell you nothing. They don't think you got brains enough to understand. So I've learned the hard way. I have been honest with people. I have tried to sincerely tell people what I have seen, what I have experienced, and for that you get ridiculed, sued, mocked, laughed at, and chased out of town. So I know what's going on. I understand, but I'm telling you, it's very, very disheartening to know that the human race can't take the truth. You know, like Cruz said to in that movie, A Few Good Men. What do you want from me? And Cruz said, I want the truth, and he said, you can't handle the truth. Well, that's exactly the point. Working class, regular people, generally speaking, can't handle the truth. They will mock you, laugh at you, spit on you. And let me tell you something else. I'm going to give you a secret maybe you've never heard before.
Okay.
There's something very interesting, and I'll tell you. Probably you never thought about it. People have always supported financially and in every other way. People will always support what they want to hear. They will not support what they don't want to hear. A classic example is if you love country western music, you're not going to pay $50 to go to an acid rock concert. If you love opera, you're not going to pay $50 to go to a different kind of music. People are going to eat where they want to eat. They're not going to support the restaurant they don't like. They're going to go where they want to eat. They're going to wear what they want to wear. So people will always support what they want. They will not support what they don't want. And that's a very big mystery, and most people don't get that. But from that, we also understand that the one thing history has told us and taught us is that the one thing most people, not everybody, but an overwhelming majority, most people do not want, and that's the truth. They're not able to handle the truth. They want to believe in their Disneyland and their dreams and their all their little silly ideas about what's going to happen to you when you die and what's going to happen here, and there's going to be a wonderful new world coming. It'll be the age of Aquarius and everything's going to be wonderful, or you're going to die and go to heaven with the Lord and all of that. People don't want to hear the truth because the truth is very, very dark. The real truth is very, very unhappy and very dark. And that's why Hollywood has made such a fortune off of movies that take you to a different world, entertain you, show you all the prettiness of Hollywood, all the movie stars, all the big money, and show you all the wonderful movies of television shows and all that. It's all Hollywood. It's all make-believe. But the people love it. They love to drink their beer, alcohol, smoke their pot, and go to the movies and watch the movies and entertain themselves because they can't handle the truth. Period. I know all about it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, the way I think about it is, though, quite honestly, I mean, listen, to hand human beings the truth sometimes is very much akin to handing monkeys a machine gun because they have no idea what to do with it. They don't accept it, and if they do attempt to use it, they're probably going to cause more damage than do anything productive.
Totally agree.
And the reason, the reason it's so strange is that you would think that people would gravitate toward the truth. You would think that people would gravitate toward the reality of what's being presented. But in truth, nobody even knows who they actually are. I mean, we talked about history, right? And now you identified right out of the gate, by the way, you identified the two ethnicities that come together to make me, right? Yeah. The Irish and the Sicilian.
Okay.
No, my grandparents, that's where they were from, Ireland and Sicily. Now, what's interesting is no matter who you speak to, you don't get a sense of the true history. It's not been memorialized. People have not passed it along in the way that we're led to believe they did in the many centuries ago by the verbal word and all of that. And there was sort of an honesty to one's own ethnicity and all this other stuff. It's all a fiction. It actually has nothing to do with anything. The more I learned about my own ethnicity, quite honestly, and I've never said this anywhere, but the more I learned about my own ethnicity and where it is I thought I came from, quite honestly, the more I understood that it was all nonsense, you might be able to learn about the past few generations from those who are still alive, maybe. But other than that, the rest of it is a grand speculation, and it's all been controlled.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. I want to give you a classic example of that. Anytime you hear the term anti-Semitic, the very term anti-Semitic is what is known as a misnomer. It's stupid. Only uneducated people use that. People who are well-read and understand the etymology of words and terms and symbols realizes that the very word Semitic has no basis in anybody's language, period. There is no such a thing as Semitic, period. End of sentence. So when you talk about anti-Semitic, that implies that there is somebody who is Semitic. In point of fact, there is nobody Semitic. It's a word. And it's a word based on a false foundation and a lie to start with. And so there is no such a thing as Semitic. Therefore, there is no such a thing as being anti-Semitic. There is a word, there is something called anti-Jewish. Now that's different. That's a different word, you'll notice. Anti-Jewish, that's one word. But the word Semitic is a misnomer. It's totally, only an ignorant person would use that term. I don't care if it's a professor in a university. I don't care who it is. If you use that word Semitic, you're ignorant of the facts of life. You haven't done your homework.
That's true, but it's made even worse, I think, by the fact that although it wasn't, one of those things that has existed for a long time, the people that were first identified with that term are not the same people that are currently identified by that term anyway.
That's right. That's right.
To my understanding, now you can correct me here, I mean, please do, but to my understanding, those that you would consider like the Palestinians over there because believe me, I've got no love for the nation state of Israel. I've got no love for any of these criminal nations, including the one I'm sitting in.
Right. Me too.
Including the one I'm sitting in. But, but the thing is, when you talk about Semitic people, even if you were to attempt to pick up that term, you're really talking about the Palestinians who are on the opposite side of the issue from those that are being described now as Semitic. I mean, unless I'm crazy again, please don't.
No, but why is Israel, even today, Israel says that they are in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you have the word Palestine? It's because, quite simply, before Israel ever existed, there were people living there, and they were called Palestinians. That's why you got Israel in Palestine.
Right.
And so, but nobody seems to understand the words and the terms and what they mean. And so the whole idea of Semitic is something that really bothers me terrible. I got a lot of things that bother me about religion, but that's one of them. When people talk about somebody being Semitic, The whole word Semitic, if you take a few minutes out of your busy day and sit down and do something really strange, read a book, open up a dictionary and look at something for the first time before you go talking about it in public and showing yourself to be a fool, like the Bible says. It's better to keep your mouth shut and have everybody think you're a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. So I'm saying that if you really want to understand words and terms, look at the word Semitic. You will find there is no such a thing as Semitic. Why? Because the word Semitic comes from one of the three sons of Noah, Noah and the ark. Remember in the Old Testament, Noah and the flood and the ark? And it says that one of the three sons of Noah was called Shem. And so the correct word was anyone who Shem gave birth to, his line of descent would be called Shemitic. There were three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So the idea being is that we have Semitic people because of Shem, one of the three sons of Noah. Now, once you start looking at the whole story of Noah and the ark, you find out it never happened. There was no Noah, there was no ark, and there was no worldwide flood. Period. It never happened. Yes, there has always been great, terrible, huge floods, on the earth. We know that because the pyramid has got salt deposits and seashells on it. So something happened a long time ago where water is not today. It was before. We know that there are pyramids sitting on the ocean floor of the Atlantic right now, 10 miles north of the island of Bimini in the Bahama Banks is a pyramid sitting on the ocean floor. But nobody seems to worry too much about that because scientists don't want to talk about it. Why? Because they don't know anything about it, and it makes them look like a fool that they've tried to talk about it. So don't even bring it up. But if you look at the world as for what it is scientifically, you will find that there have been horrible floods. Whole continents have been involved in great floods. We know that. You can see it in the strata of the mountains. But there was never a earth-wide flood that covered the whole earth above the highest peak and the highest mountain, like the Bible says. No. There's not that much water to cover the whole earth, even to cover the highest mountain. So we know that's ludicrous. But we find out later that the whole story of Noah is based on Gilgamesh, something called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is an old ancient Sumerian Babylonian story, thousands of years old, about a great prophet who had three sons and three daughters, and he was told by God to build an ark and to save the human race, and he took in animals. And it's called the Gilgamesh Epic. Go to a library and read a book about it. And it will tell you thousands of years before the Hyksos, or what we call the Hebrew people, even existed. There was the story of the great ark and the great world flood. Well, of course, the Hebrews picked that up, and now we have it as Noah and the ark. Well, all science and all archaeological and paleological scientists know there was no earth-wide flood. There was no Noah, and there was no son called Ham, Shem, and Japheth. The whole thing is a story. That's why the Bible's called the greatest story ever told. It's a story. It's not actual history. And so when you understand that, well, then if there was no flood, there was no Noah, and he didn't have three sons, well, then where do we get the word Semitic if there was no Shem? Never existed.
Well, and
that's
I'm glad.
my point.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up Gilgamesh, right, because this is something that I did study some. Of course, it was an English translation of it, so it may be questionable. But facts are facts. There are a lot of similarities between what is memorialized in the story of Gilgamesh throughout what people would call the King James Version of the Bible. Right? Gilgamesh actually has characteristics similar to that of the Christ figure, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. That's exactly right.
And in fact, I see a synchronicity. between things like, I mean, and there are various, I mean, Gilgamesh is one fine example, but there are various different stories, I'll call them, about gods or demigods who are on Earth, right, that wind up having the very same characteristics that we do find in the Judeo-Christian faith. And it seems to me like it is a continuous cycle of plagiarism, and who knows where the story actually began or what its origin was to begin with.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I mean, you see the same thing, right?
Yeah, of course. It's very obvious to anyone who's studied comparative religions and gone to university and learned how to read and think and study the history of nations and the ancient history of the world and mankind and the evolution or the changing of civilizations from time to time and the borrowing of names of gods. It's amazing. I'll tell you what's really amazing to me is that today, when in Christian churches all over the world, they're worshiping God, and God comes to us from the old Latin word Deus, D-E-U-S, and Deus is God, and so we're worshiping God in churches. But Deus is actually an interpretation of Zeus. Zeus in Greek is Deus in Latin. And so in Latin today and English we call Deus God. And so Christians are worshiping Zeus. That's a dictionary definition. Go into the library, get a dictionary, and look at the word Zeus. And it will tell you Zeus in Latin is Deus. And Deus in our language is God. So therefore, if you're a Christian and you're worshiping God, you're worshiping Zeus. That's the fact. Well, no wonder our world is filled with bloodshed and violence in the Middle East and stupidity and ignorance and self-centered stupidity in religions all over the world, and especially in America with the TV evangelists. It's an incredible story of betrayal, how the human race has accepted the old ancient pagan gods, and we give them Christian names, and therefore we are Christians. We're worshiping the Lord. We're worshiping the true Lord. No, you're worshiping the old ancient gods of Saturn, of Jupiter. That's the way you spell Jew in the King's English, was I-U. You take I-U, that's the way and we spell it J-E-W. No, in the old King's English back in the 1500s, it was spelled I-U. And the word pater, P-A-T-A-R, pater. Pater was an old ancient language. Pater was a father, from which we get the word papa. Papa and pater, pater. And so you put the I-U, which was the word for the Jew, in front of the word pater, the father of the Jews, and it becomes Iopater, was the father of the Jews. But the I's and J's are interchangeable. So now the father of the Jews is Jewpater. Get it?
Gotcha. Well, and patria is actually the Latin word for father anyway.
That's right.
So yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense. And of course, yeah, the letter J wasn't introduced into the language until later, I think, anyway.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So when you see that and they claim it as part of any sort of ancient text, it's erroneous.
That's right.
And what I also find fascinating is that the symmetry, it seems to suggest to me that all of these stories, all of them being allegories, are truthfully representations of astrological alignments.
That's exactly what it is. That's why the Bible has Jesus saying, many will look with their eyes but not see, and listen with their ears but not hear, and with the heart not get the sense of it. There's a whole story about what really happened a long time ago that we today call Christianity. And that real story has never really been told in the public. Yes, you can hear it if you go to the places like UCLA and USC and all the great universities and sit in on private lectures by the professors talking about the comparative religions and where the words for gods have come from and where the different religions have originated. Yeah, you might hear it there, but out on the streets of this world, the poor working class are never going to be privy to hear the real, honest to God truth. And the real truth is that our major religions, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, come directly from Hinduism. The Hindus are the parents of our three Western religions. Judaism comes directly from Hindu. Christianity comes directly from Hindu. And Islam comes directly from Hindu. And the people today are fighting in the Middle East, worshiping their ancient Hindu gods and killing each other. And no one has ever stopped to think, why don't we go to a library and look up what we're doing? Look up the words. Look up the word Islam and see where it really actually came from. And look up the word Catholic and see what it actually in fact means in Latin. Let's look up the word Christianity and see where it really comes from. And then you will begin to, for the first time, wake up and begin to see the horrible truth. You've all been had. Pride precedes the fall. And everyone's proud to be worshipers of the true God, and we know the whole truth, and Jehovah's Witnesses got the truth. The Mormons have got the whole truth. The Seventh-day Adventists have got the truth. The Catholic Church has got the Baptists, the Presbyterians, all these cults and groups all around the world, they got the truth, and everybody else is full of bull. Well, in point of fact, no, the real truth is that religion today is the worship of the ancient pagan gods, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And I'm telling you, when you start getting into the actual historical lineage of people like King David, King Solomon, Abraham, Moses, my God, what a story. When you start finding out where Abraham really came from, there was no Abraham. He never existed. It goes back to Hindu. And in the Hindu religion, the most important ministers in the Hindu religion were called the Brahmins. And Brahmins were called the Holy Fathers. They called the Brahmins the Holy Fathers. They were the great experts on religion and God, the Brahmin priesthood.
And it sounds very similar to the name Abraham.
That's right.
It?
If you put an A in front of Brahman, it becomes Abram. Well, that's exactly what the Bible says in Genesis. Abraham's name was Abram first, and then it was changed, the Bible says, to Abraham. Mm-hmm. No, it's Abram. And then Abram, which we have people today with the name Abram. But Abram, according to the Bible, had a wife named Sarah. Well, as it turns out, unbelievable, but as it turns out, the Brahmins had a goddess that they also worshiped. Her name was Saraswati. And so Abram was also connected to the worship of Saraswati. So today we're told that there was an Abraham and Sarah. No, Abram and Saraswati. Wake up, get a job, go to school, and educate yourself. This is the real story, and this is why all over the world today, the Abrahamic religions are killing each other. Right. Because that's what Abraham was told to do. Go kill your son. Go up and sacrifice and cut his head off and do it for God. And so we think, well, that was very holy. Abraham was given the law of God to go and kill his son. That's human sacrifice. I don't know if anybody noticed that or not. And the Hebrews are telling you that they practice human sacrifice. Go kill your son. And then, no, the angel appeared to Abraham and said, no, we were just joking. God just wanted to see if you really were neurotic enough to kill your own son. And you passed the test. Everything's fine, so you don't have to kill him. Now, we know that you we'll kill anybody we tell you to kill, and that's why the spirits, that's why the Lord loves you, because you'll kill anybody we tell you to kill.
Right. You're a good, obedient
yeah, you're good and obedient, right.
And you know what's amazing, too, is, now, I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but, of course, the word Swazi sounds kind of familiar to me as well, because one of the interesting parallels here, we all have heard about the swastika, right? Mm-hmm. That is a Hindu symbol,
right.
My very early my mind takes me back a way, because this is a long time ago when I could access these types of books, which are getting harder and harder to find. This was like a symbol of like good luck, of prosperity.
Yeah.
Or, in the Hindu, I guess I could call it a faith, but you know what I'm saying.
Of course, in the Hindu system, have swastikas, and that's why Hitler in Germany got his swastika from India. But that's where the Jews got their Star of David. Right. Star of David was called the Star of Saturn. Go back and read a story. Read the book about the planet Saturn and the ancient Phoenician and Canaanite systems, and going all the way back to India. Saturn was always represented astronomically by a 6-pointed hexagram. And so the ancient peoples in the ancient world would draw a circle on the ground. I don't know if you know this or not. They would draw a circle on the ground and put a triangle. And then they would invert another triangle on top of that one, which makes it a 6-pointed hexagram, or the Star of David. Then they would stand inside of that drawing on the ground and cast an evil spell on you. That's how you come up with a word, with a spell. And so they would cast a spell on you. And then that's where we got the word that they put the hex on you. Because it's a hexagram, a 6-pointed star. It was a star of Saturn in the ancient Hindu. Today, the Jews are still worshiping the planet Saturn. Saturn is their main god of Judaism, period. Yahweh, Jehovah, all of that stuff is all based on Saturn. Saturn was the god of the rings, Lord of the Rings, and the Jews in Hollywood are still making movies about their god, Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely.
We need to wake up.
Yes, we do. And you know what? I think the purpose for all of this is absolutely to promote the concept that as above, so must be below, and as without will be within, and vice versa. We're about to go to the break here at the top of the hour, but I do find this extremely fascinating, and what's most disturbing about it is that all of this information, truthfully, is right there in plain sight. If one begins to make a correlation and understand the causation, it almost begins to explain the depravity that one can witness across this planet among every people, regardless of whether they actually understand their ethnic origin or their traditions or anything else. I mean, to me, a very, very revolutionary thought to me was the concept that, we in the Western world have this Santa Claus who's this big red guy. I always found it really incongruous with the Christian faith, but yet part of the rituals, okay? And then when one examines the concept of Molech and the way that was, prosecuted on people in the truly pagan times, in ancient societies, it starts to make a lot more sense. And this is why,
when you understand that Santa Claus comes from the North Pole. Mm-hmm. What's that all about? Well, go back to the book of Isaiah. And in the book of Isaiah, in the 14th chapter, is talking about Lucifer, which was that's another whole subject, but it's talking about Lucifer, what the Christians call the devil. And it says that Lucifer is in the uttermost reaches of the north, way up at the very uttermost reaches of the north. Well, that's the North Pole. That's where we're getting all of this stuff from. Satan always wears red, and Santa Claus wears red. Santa is simply Satan. Mix the letters up. Satan becomes Santa.
That's right, and we're going to get Exactly. And we're going to get more into this very overwhelming information with this conversation with Jordan Maxwell. Stay tuned to the Ochelli Effect here on American Freedom Radio. We'll be right back.
And now, the most underrated voice in all media. The Alternative's Alternative. Chuck Ochelli.
Second hour on AmericanFreedomRadio.com, and thank you for joining us. If you missed the first hour with my guest Jordan Maxwell, trust me, you have missed a plethora of information regarding so many different things. And I promise you that we're going to get even deeper into the subject of what is actually being prosecuted on this planet. And I do say prosecuted for a reason. Perhaps we'll touch upon that later. But, before we go any further, I want to mention just a couple of things. One is that Mr. Maxwell will be doing a radio show again very soon, and I will give you the details on that a little later on. But speaking of the Jordan Maxwell show, if one is to go on the Internet and find jordanmaxwell.com, you don't want to go there because it's not actually Jordan's site. JordanMaxwellShow.com. Once again, JordanMaxwellShow.com is the website which is under Mr. Maxwell's control, etc., etc. And I'm not going to make any comments about the other website. Perhaps Mr. Maxwell will. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You go to JordanMaxwellShow.com. Okay. Now, in that first hour, when we were going to break, we started talking about many different parallels. Of course, the very last one was all about Santa Claus. And, gee, isn't it interesting that if you transpose the letters just a bit, it sounds a lot like Satan. Almost feel like that old church lady character when I say that, Sorry, Jordan, I'm making jokes here. But honestly, it is a joke to me because people are so misled by the ritual. They're so misled by the representation. And meanwhile, it's all a grand manipulation, not just in the history, but in their daily practices. It seems to me like there's something else happening here. And it goes beyond politics. It goes beyond the obvious. I mean, please, I don't even know if we want to begin to open up the concept of why is it that something is out there called ISIS right now that is the big boogeyman. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you have something to say about that if you choose. But, it's none of this is by accident.
None of it. None of it. The one thing you need to know about the world you live in, nothing is left to chance. Zero, nothing. So it all works because it's all organized. It's called organized crime. It's criminality on an organizational level that most people cannot wrap their minds around. So when you begin to see how a government and commerce and banking, insurance companies, banks are merely fronts for the insurance companies, and the insurance companies are the real culprits behind this thing, and it has to do with the 14th Amendment. I mean, we can get into a long discussion about why commerce is called commerce. Look it up in a law dictionary, and you will find that the word commerce, according to law, is sex. Sexual intercourse is referred to in law as commerce. It's a business. You don't think so? If it doesn't work out, you're going to court. You're not going to God. You're going to court and bring your car and your house and your money and everything else, because it has nothing to do with God. It has to do with business. It was a bad business, and the business didn't go very well. But that's your business, not my business. Yeah, well, and that's why I said, when I see you walking with some woman last night, and I tell you, you know what, that woman you were with last night is bad business. She's bad company. And you say, mind your own business. Company? Business? And then I find out you're going to get married. She's going to be your partner. Now you're talking about company, business, partner. You're talking commerce. That's why you have to have a marriage license, because your marriage, you are a corporation. You don't know this, but in 1871 it was decided that you would be a corporation. And that's why when you die, you're a corpse, because you were a corporation when you were alive. You were in business. Of course, your business has got nothing to do with my business. And what I'm doing is none of your business, but the bottom line is our lives are a business. And therefore, anything you do as in life, you better get a permit, a license to pay the fee. You can't paint your house unless you get a permit. You can't do this with your lawn unless you get the state to give you a permit, the city to give you a permit. So, and you can't drive your car without a license. You can't do business without a license. You can't do anything without a license, a permit, a fee, a fine, a charge. The whole entire system has been designed by people who are so far removed from our reality of the world. The words and terms that'll blow your mind when you finally figure out how the world really works and how you are a corporation.
Absolutely. And it struck me because, by the way, I mean, I laughed a little bit because you might recognize that little snicker of a man who has been divorced.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So I snickered because I remember distinctly sitting in the courtroom, and I wasn't even aware of most of what you just said. Although it almost sounds confusing. It makes your head spin if you really think about the use of the words, the meaning of these words, and how they seem to end up in more than one place. Well, when you're using the same language, it generally means, it makes perfect sense that they use the same words related to businesses. You have a merger essentially, which sounds a little like marriage, et cetera, right? And they describe interactions between companies as a business relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that occurred to me when I was getting divorced personally was first of all, this is nothing more than a business deal gone sideways, first of all.
Right.
And secondly, this has absolutely nothing to do with a spiritual union. This is a union of property. And I of course realized that I was not the prevalent or good part of the property in my proceedings, to be honest with you. So I knew I was at a disadvantage as soon as I walked into the court, et cetera, et cetera. But something else occurred to me, and somebody mentioned this on Skype, and I want to get to it because I'm a big fan of Star Trek. Right? I always appreciated it because it spoke to me on a bunch of different levels. But I recognize that in the entertainment business, and you mentioned it earlier about Hollywood and everything, television shows, all this stuff representing different things. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And somebody mentioned to me in Skype that, that you might have some interesting thoughts about the symbolism in Star Trek. Now, and I'm sure it goes way beyond the concept of, say people talk about it all the time with the next generation and the tablets that they used in the 80s, and now we have them now, and the cell phones, the flip phones that were prevalent for a while. No. It goes way beyond that, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It really goes beyond all of that. I mean, the very spaceship itself is called Enterprise. Enterprise is a business. And so the Enterprise is taking man where he's never been before. That's right. Business is out of hand. It's going all over now. Crazy. They're making a business out of babies who are born. They own them. And so, commerce, which is sex, according to the encyclopedia and the dictionary. And that's why it's called commerce. It's a business. And so, and like you said, different corporations have affairs with each other. They have connections. Well, when you look at this whole thing of Star Trek and Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back, there's all kinds of secret symbolism and words and concepts that are being put in front of you. But as and at the time of 9/11, there was a movie came out called Two Towers, Twin Towers, and so many movies and television shows had 9/11. Years before 9/11, there were all kinds of shows, television shows, magazines, movies that featured the word 9/11, featured 9/11. And there's about 40 movies. You go on the web, just go on the web and type in 9/11 before 9/11. And you will see all kinds of movies and television shows talking about what's going to happen on 9/11.
Well, one of the weirdest things was the show they called The Lone Gunman.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. That's a
I'm sure you're
boy.
familiar with that. That's a dude. I mean, if people don't know about this, I don't know what to tell you, but I mean, give your take on that.
Well, one of my dearest friends is what's his name? Dean Haglin. Dean Haglin and I have been friends for many years. Well, he played in the what was the sci-fi movie? I'm getting old, I can't remember. What was the sci-fi movie up in Canada, the big one? What was it? The big sci-fi series. Huh?
Well, there was
X-Files.
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 Yeah.
Okay. X-Files. And in X-Files, there was a guy who had long blonde hair and wore granny glasses, and he was a computer nerd. Remember that? The long hair, blonde hair kid? And he was in almost all the episodes. Well, that's Dean Haglin. And Dean was a very close friend of mine. We used to hang out together. So Dean gave me a copy of many of the shows, that he got. He gave them to me. But Dean Haglin was also, when they stopped making X-Files, when they stopped making it, the director, the producer, whatever his name was, I can't remember. But anyway, the producer went on to produce a new television series. And the next TV series was going to be called The Lone Gunman. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because no matter what happens in America or around the world, no matter who is killed, who's assassinated, it doesn't matter. It's always, quote, a lone gunman, end quote. So it could be a conspiracy involving 46 wealthy people killing somebody, but when you hear about it in the paper, it will be a lone gunman. So Chris Carter, the producer of X-Files, was producing a new television show, and it's called The Lone Gunman. And in it, they showed the very first one, the first episode. It's talking about how there was a group inside the U.S. government. I watched it. I've got a copy of it. Sit and watch it on television. But it was about a group of people on the inside of government at the top who were going to fly 747s and big jets into the World Trade Center and knock them down, and then go into Iraq and to the Middle East and for oil and start a major war. Well, that's what the movie was about about 8 or 9 months before 9/11. So you're seeing it 8 or 9 months before 9/11, you're seeing a television show called The Lone Gunman, in which you got jets, big super jets, big ones, flying into the World Trade Center to knock them down so that we could have an excuse to go in, get the oil and all the valuable resources out of the Middle East and take over the Middle East. That was a television special. That was a television movie. I don't know what that tells you. And so that, along with the whole idea that all kinds of stuff in the movies, like I said, go on the web and just type in 9/11 before 9/11, and you'll see all kinds of places where 9/11 pops up on the screen everywhere. So Hollywood knew what was coming. They were making movies about it 5 years before it even happened. That's the way it works.
Well, right. This kind of thing comes up a lot. And, of course, it leads to certain questions, about, you see, like a guy like Gene Roddenberry, and I read a little bit about him. I understand his life story a bit, sickly child, and he had an imagination, and he dreamt up these things and had this concept. Of course, I've, read the sanitized version of his life, where he had this concept that there would be, ready for this, one world government at some point because there'd be peace on Earth. All the benevolent reasons for it and all that. And you're exactly right about it. But the thing that I've always questioned is whether everybody who's involved in these things, the writing of them, is aware of what they're doing or whether they're being given these ideas. I mean, do you think that, like, say, a guy like Roddenberry, I mean, I know it's purely speculation unless you personally knew him, or even if you did personally know him, it might still be pure speculation. The thing is, do you think guys like that are aware all the time of what they're doing, or is it just certain people that get involved in the production? I mean, because it was a weird situation, Roddenberry getting involved with Desilu Studios, which was kind of a weird sort of marriage, and all this stuff happening in the 1960s, post, Cuban Missile Crisis kind of atmosphere in this country, and the sci-fi thing, but a lot of symbolism, even Spock with his greeting. Yep. That's a rabbinical hand sign.
That's right. That Spock hand sign, that Mr. Spock, that's a Vulcan. He was called the Vulcan.
Right.
And the reason why Mr. Spock was called the Vulcan, well, that has to do with the ancient volcanic god of the ancient Phoenician, Canaanite, Sumerian peoples. They had a volcano god, and even in Hawaii, they got a volcano goddess. So volcanoes were very important to the ancient peoples of the Middle East. And the hand sign, Mr. Spock's hand sign, dividing of the fingers like he does, that's a term in Judaism. I can't remember what it is now, but there's a term for it. And that is a blessing sign. They're being blessed. The congregation is being blessed by the rabbis making that sign. And you'll see on the web, you'll see rabbis in their synagogues blessing the people with the same sign that Mr. Spock is using. Well, right. What is that sign that Spock is using that the Jews use as a blessing? It's the split hoof of a goat. It's the split hoof of a goat. And when you understand the split hoof of the goat and why the goat is important in the Jewish religion, and it has to do with Aries, the ram, from Egypt, the constellation of Aries, the ram, and rams have split hoofs, and so the Jews were worshiping Aries in the sign of the sun in the age of Aries. And the sun in the age of Aries was always recognized by a split hoof of a goat. And then later on, they are now worshiping the sun in the age of Taurus. And so the age of Taurus was the golden calf. The sun is golden and the calf is a bull. So the golden calf was the sun being worshipped by the Jews in the age of Taurus, the bull, the golden calf. Right. Or Aries, the split hoof of a goat. And that's why today Jews still worship the goat god, and they blow the ram's horn, which is called the shofar, which is a horn of a ram. Mm-hmm. And so they're still worshiping the old ancient Egyptian god of the ram, Aries, the constellation of Aries, the ram. And then, of course, with the coming of the end of the age of Taurus, the bull, the golden calf, what's the next constellation? The next one is called Pisces. Mm-hmm. And Pisces is always represented as two fish. So then we have a new symbol for the new way of worship, a new age, and it's called Pisces. All these things are in Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It all goes back to Hindu. It's a Hindu astrological religion, and that's the name of the tune. If you don't understand that, you're never going to figure out what's going on today. All three major religions, and there's a reason why there are three: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Why three? because there's a very good reason for why 3. Because it goes back to the triune part of the whole ancient Hindu strategy was always based on 3, a triune Godhead. Mm-hmm. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I've talked to rabbis years ago. They said, yeah, we know there was no Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. Just a story. I used to go to the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies and sit and talk with rabbis, and they make motions with their head. Yeah, we know. I know. There was no Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. It's just a story. And so why? Well, because it's always a triune God. Like I said, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Christianity, Judaism, Islam is always divided into 3. Something bigger is going on that most people are not prepared to wrap their mind around how big, how ancient, and how profoundly evil this whole dirty system that we live under has been in operation for thousands of years, and people have no idea in the world. But I always say, by their fruits you shall know them. What is the fruitage of the 3 great religions today that worship the Lord? The fruitage, by their fruits you will know them. And so, people came to Jesus, as the scripture says, people came to Jesus and asked him, they showed him some seeds, and they asked him, what are these seeds of? What kind of seeds are these? And the Bible has Jesus say, go plant the seed, stupid. Go plant it, water the seeds, and watch what comes up. And if an apple tree comes up, well, I guess that's what it was an apple seed. But if a pear tree comes up, well, I guess that's what it was, a pear tree. So by their fruits you will know them. Well, okay, what are the fruitage of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam if it isn't lies, deception, bloodshed, violence, wars, drug addiction, drive-by shootings, killings? The whole entire world is engulfed in chaos, violence, stupidity, and ignorance, and bloodshed everywhere. That's the fruitage of the 3 major religions. That's the fruitage that this world is now living with. The blood, sweat, dirty stuff going on, sex, violence, drug addiction. It's an incredible story. In Islam, you can marry a little 4 or 5 year old girl and take her to bed. And if you don't want to marry her, you can pay the parents a certain amount of money and you'll marry her for one night. She's only 6 years old, but you can marry her for one night. Did you know that? I mean, Allah doesn't care. If you want to rape a little 6-year-old, who cares, as long as you pay for it. And so it's true. And people don't realize you can buy a little girl or a little boy, or you can marry them if you want to marry them, or if you just want to marry them for the night. It's only going to cost you a little more just for marrying them for the night. Nobody is thinking very clearly. When everybody's thinking alike, that means nobody's thinking at all. Somebody better look at the filth and degeneracy going on in the Catholic Church with the altar boys and the Islam, with the marrying little 4 and 5 year olds and killing and murdering, bloodshed everywhere. My God, and then they'll get into Judaism. My God, with the human sacrifice and circumcision, cutting off the foreskin of penises and all kinds of, and sucking the blood off the penis. There's all kinds of dirty stuff that nobody is talking about. Nobody wants to own up to it, and it's dirty, and that's why nobody wants to talk about it. It's about time somebody have the guts and talk about it, because that's where we're going. As a human civilization, we're going down the tubes with religion, stupidity, and ignorance.
Well,
that's
right.
the name of that tune.
And it permeates everything, because there are people out there that might say, okay, listen, I don't adhere to any of the, what they call the Abrahamic religions. Of course, we've already covered, that's a misnomer, but you know what I'm talking about when I say that. Obviously, the 3 major religions that we discussed, right? So you might say to yourself, well, listen, I'm an atheist. I don't, I'm not influenced by these things. Well, think again. Yeah. Here's an interesting correlation. I'm going to throw these things at you, and you take them apart or tell me I'm out of line, any which way you want. If you think about it, and you imagine the ancient symbolism, for the feminine, which looks like a V, the letter V,
right.
let's just say, right? And then you think about the common symbol for the masculine, which is the V turned upside down. You take those two things together, and what you have is something that looks very much like the square and compass, on any Masonic building anywhere that you see, but it goes beyond that. Let's just not stick with the Masons. Lightning round here. If you complete those symbols, you can make that 6-pointed star, the hexagram that we were talking about earlier, can't you?
That's right.
And here's another thing. Notice military ranks around the planet. The masculine symbol, this thing is your rank. In fact, excuse me for being semi-vulgar here, but listen, honestly, the soldier with the most penises on his arm, which is essentially what that is a symbol for, is the one in charge. So, these things all together, and there was one last thing I just want to throw in. Oh. Those that adhere to, listen, I don't believe in any sort of, I'm an atheist, an absolute atheist. I just believe in, I adhere to the state. I'm sorry, but if you take a look at justice, in and of itself, the way it's characterized, this to me is reminiscent of a Babylonian goddess. The Statue of Liberty is reminiscent of a Babylonian goddess.
That's right.
And the ancient goddess religion, and I'll finish with this. The ancient goddess religion, liberty, justice, these words in and of themselves have roots in the ancient goddess religion, and this is a cruel and extremely brutal religion that you're basically adhering to when you're adhering to the state. Now, I'm not saying that everyone that participates in all these things has evil intent in their heart. What I'm saying is that the system, every system across the planet is extremely diseased with this prevalent evil. And here's the problem. If we say, well, listen, it's completely contaminated, everything is surrounding us, where is it coming from, Mr. Maxwell?
That's it. That's exactly right. That's a very good point. Where is it coming from? The classic example is the Washington Monument. I've talked about this before. The Washington Monument is called an obelisk. It comes out of Egypt. It's an Egyptian obelisk. The obelisk always represented the male phallic in its erection, the male erection. That's what it represented. If you go back to and look at the history books and the reference books on Egypt, it represents the male phallic in its erection, and and Washington Monument connects directly to the Oval Office, the female ovaries, the Oval Office, the ovaries. And so sex is interwoven into everything. Everything in religion is based on sex. And this is why you have all the problems with sex in the Catholic Church and sex in religion and sex in the Jewish religion and sex in the Hindus. And it's all based on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's just all of the major things which influence the human life is what we call religion. And so you ask any little 8-year-old, where is God? He'll point straight up. God's out there. Well, if he's out there, that means he's not from Toledo, Ohio. He's out there. And if he's out there, that means he's extraterrestrial. And that's where we get into something really interesting. Now, what do extraterrestrials have to do with the massive stupidity and chaos in the human world today? Are we being manipulated by extraterrestrials? Well, don't think that's funny, because Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all recognize, as Hindus and all the rest of the ancient religions of the world, they recognize the presence on the earth for thousands of years of angels, spirits, demons, ghosts, poltergeists, jinns. I don't care what you call them, but there are other entities, other intelligent entities here, spirits and demons and devils or angels. Sons of God, the Watchers. There's all kinds of words for what's over there on the other side in the spirit world. But whatever it is, it's real. As above, so below. It's real. there are spirit entities on the other side. There's no doubt about that. And there are spiritual, metaphysical things which man cannot explain that's happening every day around us that we don't see, or we're scared to talk about it. Everybody I talk to usually tells me, yeah, I've had some experiences with UFOs and saw this and saw that, and I saw a demon in my bedroom one night, and I saw this and that. Most people have, but nobody's talking about it publicly. I think it's about time we start talking publicly about the demonic depravity of alien life forms, whether they be angels or actual aliens from other worlds, we don't know. But whatever it is, they're here, and they're causing us a heartache and tragedy by putting us against each other, watching. And there's, anytime you have a fight in Las Vegas, if you have a big heavyweight championship fight, you got to have a fight promoter. You got to have somebody who puts it together and gets it all lined up. They're called fight promoters. And so who is it that's the fight promoter on the earth? Because God knows we got a lot of fighting going on. Somebody's promoting this. Somebody's promoting the wars and fighting on the earth. And I would hasten to think it might be the bankers who make a hell of a lot of money off of wars. War is a good business. You need to invest your son. So war is a business. A lot of billions of dollars a week are spent on wars. So today, that's what we have in the world today. Wars and bloodshed and violence. And where's Christianity, Judaism, or Islam? They're right in the middle of it. So that's what you've got for the world of religion. You better wake up and find out the religions of this world are nothing more than the old ancient worship of the gods. We talk about in the ancient world that the gods were, the primal gods required human sacrifice. And you have to cut their heads off like the Aztecs and the Mayas. You have to pull out their heart. So the Aztecs and the Mayas will cut a man's heart out and hold it up to the sun. So what they're doing is they're giving God their heart. They're giving their heart to God. Well, of course, the Aztecs didn't do that. They gave somebody else's heart to God. Right. They cut the heart out and hand it up to God. So they're giving God your heart. Well, Christians say that today. Oh, I just gave my heart to the Lord. Having no idea in the world, all of this stuff goes back to the ancient Phoenician, Canaanite child sacrifice, blood rituals. It's just incredible what the church has done to this world, what religions have done to this world. And it's a whole story once you get into the specific stories within each major religion. That's a real interesting study, where Moses actually came from, and where, King Solomon and King David and all those people never existed, and where did those words come from? And in the ancient world, there was no Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are relatively recent English names. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It has to do with the four seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It has to do with the worship of God's Son. That God's Son is the light of the world. Well, of course, the sun is the light of the world. And so it has four seasons. Well, it does. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, spring, summer, autumn, winter. It has 12 apostles, 12 signs of the zodiac, right. The 12 months of the year. All of this is well known to a handful of highly educated people in universities, but the people on the street have never been told, and that's why it sounds so absolutely ludicrous when most people hear this, because they've never heard it before. That there is no Jesus, there is no Jesus, there was no King David, no King Solomon, there was no Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, none of that. It's the triune God system. All of your religions, both Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are all based on ancient astrological terms, symbols from the astrology. Well, that makes sense because that's where God is. He's out there in the heavens. So I'm just saying that until and unless the human race is ready to wake up and find out that our governmental systems, our banking systems, insurance and educational and law enforcement systems, Our theological systems are all based on dark, evil, dirty stuff that's been matriculated down through history for thousands of years, and we're still wallowing in the same old stupidity and killing each other over all these false and miserable gods. Allah is nothing more than Yahweh. Yahweh in Hebrew is Allah in Arabic. Allah, Yahweh. Same thing. They're both moon gods. Moses was a leader of a moon cult. Moses is a name for a god in Egypt that led in Egypt a moon cult, a lunar cult. And that is overwhelming once you start getting into Moses and who was Moses. And there was no Moses. Moses was a god of the moon. And that's why today Jews celebrate their holy days after sundown. After sundown. Why? Because that's when the moon comes out. So Jews are not going to celebrate their holy days during the day. No, those are sun worshipers. So those people who worship God's sun, the light of the world. Yeah, well, the sun is the light of the world. And so those people who worship the sun we're called Christians. So they had their celebrations under the sun. But the Jews, no, they were moon worshipers. So they have their holy days after sundown. And that's when the moon comes out. And they have their holy days, what we call the Sabbath. Remember all of that stuff about keeping the holy day of the Sabbath, keep it holy? Right. Sabbath comes from a word in the Sumerian Babylonian system. If you know that culture, all you need to do is look up the word Sabbath. And it comes from the word for the planet Saturn. Saturn, the planet with the star, with the rings. He was called Lord of the Rings. Well, that's true. They were still making movies about Lord of the Rings. But Saturn was the Lord of the Rings, and Saturn in the Phoenician Canaanite was called Shabbath. 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 Shabbath was Saturn. And so your worship of Shabbath, they called it Sabbath. So when you think you're doing something holy and righteous by keeping the Sabbath, you're worshiping an old, ancient Babylonian, Sumerian god Saturn. Wake up, and that's why your religions are filled with bloodshed, violence, ignorance, confusion, stupidity, because you are being led by the nose to worship an old, ancient Phoenician Canaanite god called Saturn, Lord of the Rings.
Well, right, and once again, just to explain synergy, and this is something, because I did take some time to study many different cults historically as best I could, practices which still are pervaded today. Here's an interesting thought. Notice that the number 3, the triangulation, these types of things are often utilized in the invocation of all sorts of what they now call curses. And it seems to me as though the fact that things are broken into 3 and things are broken into 3, all of this leads back to some very dark religions, most of the records of which are now absent. Okay, but they still resonate throughout. And notice the number 3 continuously comes up. Everything seems to have the number 3. All of these repetitions. And listen, anybody even who has a very basic Hollywood understanding of what they might describe as black magic knows that someone chants, repeats, continues through repetition to state something over and over again, and then it comes to fruition. It seems to me as though all of these things which are arranged in the triangles, that are arranged by 3s, are all in and of themselves, in fact, the curses which we're dealing with. And still, at this point in time, nobody can identify where the curses originated. Nobody is aware of what seems to be a grand manipulation. I mean, listen, if you think about a marionette at all and you imagine the puppet strings coming down and manipulating the movements of the world, then you must want to know where the hands truly are. Now, Saturn is the representation of something, And so are all the planets and the understandings of them and so on and so forth. That's why they're named that, by the way, once again. They're named for each of these things. And I find, again, all of these things seem to interlock, come together, and bring one mosaic that states unequivocally that the entire planet has been cursed. But I always question where it actually comes from. The people on the planet are continuing the cycle, are propping it up, and are making it happen, whether they realize it or not. They're making sure that it's being repeated, but they're not the authors, are they?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I've said before, I think that the whole world, the way I view it, it's just my view, but I'm 75 years old. I've been around the world, and I just view the whole world as like a kindergarten that's being run by Hell's Angels. Mm-hmm. The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked ones, the scripture says. The whole entire, it doesn't say the whole world except Alabama. No, the whole world, period. The whole earth is lying in the power of a demonic depravity, stupidity, which has given birth to chaos, violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, violence, gang wars, killings, racism. That's the whole world is lying in the power of some kind of a dark, sinister, and evil force. You got to wonder, why is the heart of a human on its left side? What is that all about? That's called the solar plexus on your left side of your chest, and that's where the heart is. Why is it on the left? Well, in Latin, the word left is sinister. So the heart is very sinister. Well, it's on the left of the heart. On the chest. I'm just telling you that 99% of the people on the face of the earth have never heard anything dealing with the real dark occult world and how it works and what the words mean and where do we get churches. And we talk about something in the book of Revelation, Gog of Magog. Well, that's what Jews meet. They meet in the synagogue. Mm. Somebody needs to look at these words and find out what's really going on, and then for the first time, you will begin to see, oh, I see what's going on. We are crawling on our knees to ancient pagan, demonic, depravity gods who were the gods of human evolution, human disease, human religions, all kinds of human stupidity and wars. It's an extraordinary case of the human race being totally misled. And the only thing we can do about it is kill each other. So as far as I'm concerned, no, somebody needs to look at Allah and what this Allah really is and see the connection between Allah and Yahweh of the Hebrews and see what that really is. And then you will begin to get into finance and banking. And then from there you get into government. And all of a sudden you begin to see the entire world of mankind has been misled a long time ago.
Right, absolutely. And you know what? We're running lower on time than I really wish we were at this point, Mr. Maxwell. And I'm going to ask, and of course we've only scratched the surface of what Jordan Maxwell, talks about. The things that I reference, I mean, anybody who listens to my show knows I reference a lot of this stuff. And honestly, it's not as though I picked it up from you directly, but a lot of the same observations that you're making just seem like, no-brainers to me. It's water is wet. Okay. It's by observation. You see it, therefore it is. I mean, it's just one of those things that happens. But before we run out of time, I mean, we have definitely denoted to the listener exactly how diseased the planet is. And if you think about how contaminated every single system is based on all of these different things, and you can see it in the symbols, you can see it in the actions, you can see it in the, what I call the worship of death, which is the true religion on this planet right now.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wonder, is there a chance in your mind for all of us being in this sickly, very evil-driven state, is there a chance for redemption
For individuals, not for the country, not for the country, no. There's never been a redemption for a nation of people. No. Not at all. It's only for individuals. Look at, and all of this goes back to the stars. I mean, I take it all the way back to astrotheology. The most ancient science the world has ever known was called astrotheology. That's where the real truth is. That's where the legitimate bedrock, down home, legitimate truth that people need to, if you're going to worship something. The very word worship comes from the combining of two words. The very first word, worth, W-O-R-T-H, worth, the value of something. It's worth. And ship, put it together with ship, like citizenship and courtship and scholarship and all the other ships. That's maritime admiralty law, all kinds of ships. But worthship becomes worship. And so you're saying whatever it is you're spending a lot of time on and looking at and devoting a lot of energy to is what you worthship. You're putting a lot of value and worth on it. I put a lot of value and worth on education, knowledge, intellectual acumen, being able to read and think and spell. And like any other human, I make all kinds of mistakes because I always say I'm just an ordinary man pursuing an extraordinary knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so therefore I'm in no position to be an authority on anything. But I'm smart enough to be able to read, and I can tell what I'm looking at. And so I understand where all of this stuff has come from. There's a whole world out there. I wish I could remember all the things I wanted to talk about because there's so much out there, so much to talk about, and things come to my mind when you're talking, but then they're gone just as quickly. So there's so many different things we need to know. And the bottom line on all of this, I would say, is the biggest single problem we have on the earth today, and God knows we can sit and talk about 100 of them, and all of them are deadly, from wars and drugs and killing and stupidity and everything else. But I think the single biggest problem the earth has today is human stupidity and ignorance. Mm-hmm. We're ignorant because we don't read, we don't think, we don't question, we don't want to know. That's a very big word, want to know. And people, look at, you go into somebody's bedroom at night, slip in quietly and they're sound asleep, and you slip into their bedroom and you turn on a 600-watt bulb right next to them when they're sleeping. Of course it's going to scare them to death. They're going to jump and out of their sound sleep. And then when they find out what happened, they're not going to think it's very funny. It's not going to be humorous and funny that you invaded their bedroom and turned on the light and frightened them with that bright light. And so that's why people who are intellectually brilliant are trying to explain something and enlighten you. And if you've been asleep for all these years, sound asleep, ignorant, ill-informed, unread, don't know what's going on, and somebody who is intellectually and spiritually enlightened or brilliant, that's a word we use in relation to light, comes in to enlighten you, and you don't want to hear it. That's why the scripture says that Pontius Pilate brought to the people. There's a scripture in the Bible, in the New Testament, talks about Jesus and Barabbas, and I can't remember if it was the governor of Judea, but anyway, the leader of the people in the city, the Bible says, brought two criminals out and to present them to the people. And the governor said to the people, said everybody in town was there, and they said that the governor said to the people, here's two prisoners. One is Barabbas, who everybody knows is a murdering thug, criminal. Everybody knows that. And then there's on the other side, we have Jesus, the truth and the light, who's teaching people the truth and the light. Which one do you want? I can release one to you. And the scripture says with one voice, there wasn't discussion, no, one voice, everyone said, give us Barabbas, which is a symbolic story, a metaphor telling you that when the town, the city, the state, the country, or the world. When a group of people are confronting the truth in the light or a criminal, they will always say, give us Barabbas. Give us the lying, cheat, thugs, criminals. We know that they're thugs and criminals. We know that's how they got to be where they are, by being filthy, degenerate, murdering criminals, and they get to be a dog-eat-dog world. They're on the top. So that's what we want. We want to vote for them because they're like us. They have no morals, nothing concerns them about killing people. We don't either. And so give us Barabbas. We don't want Jesus with the truth and the light. We're not interested in truth and the light. Talking about money now. It's business.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Before we run out of time, I'm going to say this. It is true that is precisely what people ask for. When you wonder and you look around the world why the corporations behave as they do, they poison us, the governments torture people, destroy things, go to war, and absolutely abuse the populations, it is generally because that is what the people have asked for, not necessarily with the one voice that you were talking about, but truthfully with their actions. Much That's like right. You were talking about earlier, you'll know the tree by the fruit it bears. That's well, right. The fruit that you bear is the leadership you wind up with, the individuals that rise to the top. This is what happens. And
That's right.
You know, you said you missed a whole bunch of things you could have said tonight. Yeah. Well, that's okay, because you're going to have plenty of opportunities to do it on American Freedom Radio on Saturdays, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. The Jordan Maxwell Show will air on American Freedom Radio, and you'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss all of these things at length without somebody like me interrupting you.
I'm delighted to be on with you, and it's a real privilege. I very much appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'm doing my own show on American Freedom Radio Network, and I've got so many things that I want to talk about. And I feel at 75 years old, I don't have much more time on this earth. And there's so many things I wish I could tell the public. I wish I could tell people that I know, and I'm not special. There's nothing special about me, but I've been in the company of. For many, many years, I've been in the company of extraordinary people that you have no idea in the world that I know. And I've heard extraordinary, brilliant stuff from people who know on the inside. And that's all I want to do, is I'd like to be able to share knowledge that I know the world is looking for. People are groping in the dark, picking up on any kind of silly, nonsensical religion, TV preachers and TV and politicians who are going to save the world. Then you find out they're nothing but a bunch of communists and Marxist-Leninists. They're a bunch of Nazis, fascists. My God, the world is in terrible shape, and the only reason why is because the people, as I said, are ignorant and ill-informed. Knowledge is power, and that's why Americans have no power, because they have no knowledge of what's really going on, what the real story is. And when you find out, you're going to wish you didn't know, believe me.
That's it. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
they tell you all the time, because you just might get it. Yeah. And I want to thank you, Mr. Maxwell, for joining us tonight. Of course, for more information on Jordan Maxwell, you go to JordanMaxwellShow.com. JordanMaxwellShow.com. That is the proper website. Any other site, any other, don't accept any other impersonations, imitations, no exceptions, substitutions, et cetera, et cetera. And Jordan Maxwell is certainly one of a kind, and I want to thank you so much for having come on tonight and done this with me for 2 hours. I know it's, a little bit odd, because like I said before, I don't script, I don't prepare with the guest, because it's just one of those things. I like the spontaneous discussion, and I really thoroughly enjoyed this as well, sir. And I want to give you the final word tonight on the Ochelli Effect here on American Freedom Radio. But don't forget, guys, on Saturday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, okay, and check your time zones wherever you are. The Jordan Maxwell Show will be on American Freedom Radio. But, Mr. Maxwell, the final word from you, sir.
Yes, I would just say to all the people who have been my supporters and people who have wanted to know and who are interested to contact me, who have been contacting me and sending, buying products and books and videos from my old website, jordanmaxwell.com. I want everyone to know that's not my website. It was stolen from me, so stay away from jordanmaxwell.com. If you want my material and talk to me, go to Jordan Maxwell Show. I have a lot of material on my website, and also I have a new research website on the Jordan Maxwell Show, and it's called Research Society. So click on Research Society and join if you wish, because I'm piling all of my work and all my documents and pictures and everything on my new Jordan Maxwell Research Society website.
Right, Jordan,
thank you.
JordanMaxwellShow.com for the Research Society. Click on it, go to it, learn, understand. Remember, like he said, knowledge is power. And I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.